Hey guys, it's Miss Narez here with another art lesson from my home studio in Coppell, Texas. In this lesson, we will learn some fun techniques you can use with watercolor paints while we create a fall landscape. You will need crayon, a black crayon, paper, thick paper if you have it. Sketchbook paper would work just fine. You'll need watercolors and water, of course. We're also going to be using some fun things if you can find around your house some plastic wrap. This will be an interesting way to give our watercolors some cool texture. I'm using cling wrap. Looks like this. All right, and also today, table salt is something else I'd like for you to try if you have some. Just general salt that you would use to spice your food. So let's get started with our crayon and paper. We're going to turn our paper horizontal for our landscape design. This would be vertical for a portrait, but we want to use longer for landscape. I'm going to start at the bottom of my paper. I'm going to make a pumpkin. I'm going to start with the letter C. And I'm going to make this pumpkin pretty big because it's lower on the paper. It's going to be the closest pumpkin to us. Now I'll scoot over to the other side and do a backward C. But notice I left a little gap of space for us to draw our stem. You guessed it. So two curved lines. If you can put a smile at the bottom of that, that will show the stem going into the pumpkin. And then at the top of this pumpkin stem, we will draw an oval, like so. Now on a pumpkin, you'll typically see lines on the stem, but also lines on the pumpkin. And even some curlicue lines coming off the pumpkin called tendrils. And on that tendril, we could add a leaf. And now let's talk about the lines on the pumpkin. Pumpkins have these interesting curved lines on them called ribs. You can put one curve in the middle and two on the sides, and those curves should follow along with the outside curve. Now I'm going to place a hill here, and that's going to be the foreground, the place closest to me in the artwork. On the next hill, we're going to draw two smaller pumpkins using those same letter C and backwards letter C's. We'll add all the same details, but notice they're a little higher on the page and they're a little smaller, so it's going to look like they're farther away. And this part of the painting we can call the middle ground. There's three parts to this landscape. The foreground will be the part closest to us. The middle ground, of course, is in the middle. And then I'll even show you how we'll make some pumpkins in the background. So let's add a hill for this pumpkin. And now we'll think about the background. I think I'll put a couple of pumpkins right in the middle, but they're going to have to be a little higher and a little smaller. So our two letter C's. Curved lines for the stem. Don't forget the oval on top. A couple lines for details. We've got our ribs, our stem, and let's not forget our fun to draw tendrils. And a quick leaf. So let's see, what should I do next? We're gonna need a hill for this pumpkin to sit on. But I think I'll stop there. I think I'm going to add one more pumpkin to be a little buddy pumpkin for this guy. And then we'll finish off that hill. So add all your pumpkin details. And now we can finish the hill in the background. Yeah, kind of like that. Okay, next up, I think I'm going to make this a nighttime scene. So I'll draw a big full moon. Just like this. Okay, and that does it for the drawing portion of the video. Next up, let's talk about how to use your watercolor set. The first thing you'll need to do is get your watercolors wet. Typically, watercolors in this style are all dried up, so you have to add a few drops of water to each of the colors you plan to use. I think, though, I'm going to just be doing the ground for the moment, so I'm going to get the green wet. I'll add quite a few drops of water to that. I'm also going to do the yellow and blue because I can make a different tone of green to my liking by mixing blue and yellow together. I'll show you how. So I've got quite a few drops in each of the colors I plan to use. Let's see, I got a little green in my yellow, so if this happens to you, you can use a paper towel. Use a little corner of the paper towel to soak up the color that you're trying to clean out of one color. Okay, we'll add a little bit more water to that one again. That's better. So one goal you want to try to fulfill today is not mixing the colors together as they are here. We're going to be moving some of the colors over to the lid, which you could also call your paint palette. I'll show you. So I'm going to stir up this yellow a little bit now that the water's had a chance to sit in it and the colors are getting really nice and thick. I'm going to add some of that yellow over to my palette. Takes a little bit of work, but you just keep working it over there. And then you're going to rinse your brush off so that you can get some blue paint and add just a dot of blue. Blue's a really strong color and yellow is not. So we'll just do a little mixing first and then add a little touch of blue. And now I have a nice deep green. I think it's going to look really nice in my painting, especially since I'm trying to make it look a little bit more like nighttime. A brighter green might look more like daytime. So you can even add a little bit of water to thin out your paints. One goal you want to have as a watercolor artist is to make sure your watercolors are never too thick. You want to be able to see through them. So what I'm doing here is adding a touch of water to one section of my painting. I'll do the hill in the background first. I'm just going to get it a little bit damp, and then I'll use that green that I made to spread around. This technique is known as wet on wet because you started with wet paper and now you're adding some wet water paint. So I can add different values, different tones. I've got the brighter green I can touch in and then come back with a little bit of the darker green. And if you feel like you've used a little bit too much water, you can always use your clean paper towel to soak some of it up and try again. I like to make it look as if the whole area has different shades of green. It's not just all one flat color. Okay, just a little touch more here and there. And now, before it dries, this is a really important part. You've got to make sure it's wet enough to do this next part where we're going to take the saran wrap, the plastic wrap. I'm going to tear a piece off that says as big as or a little bigger than the section that's wet. I'll kind of scrunch it up a little bit, and I'm going to place it on top of that green color and just leave it alone. It needs to be a little scrunched and pressed down. And if you can wait long enough for it to dry, you'll get to see a really cool effect that it creates. So I'm going to continue with the rest of the grass, working section by section so that I can keep it wet enough so that it doesn't dry before I'm ready for my plastic wrap. If you ever get a little too much green in one spot, you can take that green that you have and move it around to a different spot. And if you run out of that green that you've created, you'll just need to make a little bit more. So I'm going to continue doing this until I paint the entire grassy surface. And with each area that stays wet enough, I'm going to take a piece of plastic wrap to put on top. And then you want to try to not move the plastic wrap around too much. It could kind of smear and get onto other parts of your painting. But if that happens, don't worry. It's okay to make a few mistakes. We're just trying to do our best and make sure we have fun. So I'm going to keep going. I'll put this in fast mode now so you can follow along and get your painting completed too. Okay, so finishing up on adding the plastic wrap to my green grassy surface. And the next thing I'm going to do is clean up a little bit. I'm going to rinse my brush just a little bit, and I'll also wipe off my paint palette so I can use some new colors for the sky portion of our painting. For my nighttime sky, I think I'll be using a little purple and blue. But you know, I can make another version of purple if I mix blue with red. So I'll get my red wet a little bit too. Got red, purple, and blue. So I'll start adding colors to my palette. I can add them separately, I can mix them together, I can make any different combinations I care to. So now let's take a little blue and add to the red. We'll be making our very own purple. Ooh, that's a nice dark purple. I like that for a nighttime sky. If you think your purple looks a little too blue, you can always add more red. And if then it looks too much like red, you can always add a little bit more blue and keep going until you find just the right purple that you like. That's looking better. But I really like to use different values together so that we have a lot of variety in our colors in the sky. So I'm going to make a lighter version of a purple and then just keep mixing some colors until I think I have enough to get started on my sky. Okay, I think that'll be good for now. So we're going to do the wet on wet technique. So I'm going to get the sky damp, make the paper a little bit wet. If you have really thin paper, you might want to use less water. But this thick paper I'm using is nice because it can take water and soak in and then actually allow you to add more water without making too many puddles. That's what you definitely want to try to avoid, is too many puddles. Now you want your paper to stay wet. That's why we're wetting it before we put the color on. Because we're going to do a new technique, not with saran wrap this time. We're going to use that table salt I told you about. So I'm going to sporadically move around colors, trying not to cover up other colors. I like for the colors to still show through. If you just paint right over the colors you already put on, you're making new colors and it's only going to be one color. So in order to keep your colors a little bit separate, you just kind of move around and find a place where there's not a lot of color. Try not to cover up the colors that you put there before. So I'm going to quickly work, just kind of move the colors around, have fun and play with it. And before that dries, I'm going to be using the salt. So keep an eye on your paper. If it starts to look like it's drying up, grab that salt and go ahead and sprinkle, but keep the salt right on top of where the paint is. Not in the dry spots. It's okay to get a little bit there. You might already can tell that the salt will soak up parts of the color and it'll leave a particularly interesting pattern and texture on our sky. But you'll have to wait to see the end results till everything is all dry. So I'm going to keep adding color to my sky, trying not to make it all one color. I want it to be lots of different colors. And every little section that I create, I can go back and add more color to if I need to, but I want to make sure that I keep my sections wet and add salt before it dries. I think I'm ready for a little more now. Fun. Okay, so I think I'm going to continue this process for the entire sky, and I want you to do the same. Then we will let our paintings dry and we'll pick right back up where we left off next week. So you have to be very patient. Try not to touch the salt or the saran wrap until everything is all dry. Keep your painting in a nice, safe place so that little siblings can't get to it or any of your favorite little pets can't eat your homework kind of thing. And then next week we'll have even more fun working on our pumpkins and the moon. All right, guys, I hope you had a lot of fun. I'm going to put this in fast forward now. You can follow along with me, but just finish up your sky and have fun. Oh, and don't forget, it's really important in the end to clean up after yourselves. So you'll want to wipe off any paints that are mixed together on your palette, and you can also clean your palette, but if there's any colors in the paint pans left together, you can touch those with a paper towel to get them cleaned up. Okay, here we go. Bye-bye.